It's gonna start snorting for some unknown reason.
Alright, perfect. It is 1 o'clock, so we're gonna get started. Everybody just came out of nowhere. There was like, all of a sudden I got nervous. So many people looking at me. But my name is Devin. I'm part of the education team here at Crawford Lake and also over at Mountsburg. So if you've ever been to any of our parks before, you might recognize me. Thank you guys for coming out at one of my favorite times of year, or what we call our Sweetwater season. It's all about maple syrup. Do you guys like maple syrup? Right? It's a good. The days are getting longer. It's getting warmer out. We're starting to hear birds come back that we never heard before. Right? We're starting to see maybe some bugs fly out. There's some mosquitoes around here the other day, so mosquitoes are coming back. Woohoo! And it's a great time of year to celebrate something that is truly Canadian, right? Maple syrup. That maple leaf, it's on our flag. It's something that's been made in Canada for thousands and thousands of years. And in Crawford Lake here, if you are right now in the middle of one of our reconstructed longhouse villages. So 600 years ago, there would have been about 250, 300 Wendat people living here. And this time of year would have been extremely important, extremely special, because this is the time of year when the trees are just starting to wake up from their winter dormancy. And one of the first trees to do that is the maple tree. Now we often have people who ask, well, how did anybody even figure this out, right? Really strange concept to dig into a tree, get watery stuff out, boil it and boil it and boil it to make something so delicious. And 600 years ago, there wasn't even any metal technologies. That was something that Europeans brought later. So a lot of our syrup industry today relies heavily on metal and on plastic and materials and labor force that you just didn't have 600 years ago. So as part of our celebration, we wanted to not only acknowledge some of the amazing things that people long ago were able to figure out and discover, but also give a chance to teach and educate about how easy we have it now, because this would have been way more difficult, a lot harder to actually be able to make. Now, the first step in the process of making a syrup or making a maple sugar is to be able to actually get into the tree, right? Today we usually use power drills. Maybe 200 years ago with the early settlers, you might have had a brace and bit where it's all man-power trying to drill in a tree. But 400 to 600 years ago, you didn't necessarily have those tools. You did, however, have stone tools that you can get to be super, super sharp. Some of the tools you can even get to be 4 times sharper than a razor, so not too bad to use. However, it wasn't able to get quite as deep into the tree as our drills can nowadays. So their technique to actually get into the sapwood of the tree is a little bit different. Today we drill a single hole in and out, but 600 years ago, you might have just been slashing into the sapwood of the tree, sometimes into a V formation, sometimes just a straight slit, sometimes a straight across. Every group did it a little bit differently, depending on what was kind of the style and how people were learning and what they felt actually worked best 600 years ago. But when you dig in, as the temperatures start to rise, so on a day like today, the trees are probably running really, really well, the nice sunny, warm weather. So the sap will start to rise from a tree's roots, will rise up the trunk and out into the branches. And the sap will start to collect, start to bubble up on some of the exposed sapwood. And if you can drill into it, you're also able to place in a wooden spile. Something kind of like this, made out of different wooden materials. Often a really great spile material to use comes from this tree, shrub right behind us. This is called a staghorn sumac. It can be found all over the place. It's a tree with the red fuzzy berries. And inside the center of its branches, it has a really soft pith. So it's really soft in the middle, really easy to hollow out and make into a nice, perfect wooden spile like this. So as the sap starts to drip, starts to flow, comes out your spile, you need to be able to collect it in something. If you already went on a hike today, you might have seen that we have a few buckets down on the way to go see Crawford Lake. We use plastic spiles and plastic buckets today, but 600 years ago, you might have been collecting your sap into a container made from bark of a very important tree. This actually comes from a birch tree. So birch is a hydrophobic bark. It is waterproof. a great material to use when you want to collect something that is mostly water. And hopefully you would have one a little bit better sealed than ours. We have a few holes in it, but that's okay, just for show. You don't want to lose all that sap after you went to all that hard work. And you'll be able to collect all that sap. Now, sap is a tree's food. Every single tree in the forest makes sap. It's just depending on the tree, their sap will contain different sugars in it and different amounts of sugars. And maple sap has sugars that humans really like to eat. So as the sap flows, it is about 97% water, 2 to 3% sugar. And the whole process, which hasn't changed over hundreds and hundreds of years, is to just collect that really watery sap and to boil off that water until you're left with the sugar. That's why you have to start off with a lot of sap. You need about 40 liters of sap just to make 1 liter of maple syrup. So you have to start off with a lot to end up with a little bit. Just a process of taking away. We don't add the color to it, we don't add the flavor. The tree has done that all on its own. That's why maple trees are so amazing, because they taste great. And for early First Nations groups, maple was not the only tree that they were tapping and harvesting the sap. There's also other species of trees that have delicious saps that you can collect throughout the year. It's just maple trees have a really delicious one, so it's probably not a hard jump to go, hey, that maple sap is the best. Let's just keep going on that tradition longer and longer. All of your sap, there's a few different ways that you can actually boil it down. One way is to use a clay pot. You put your sap in the pot, put the pot in the fire. Being next to the fire will hopefully heat it up, boil it up enough that you'll be able to boil off some of the water. Now, the problem with this is that 600 years ago, you didn't have fire kiln pots. So your clay pottery wasn't quite as hard as some of our clay pottery today. And if it got too hot in that fire, the clay could actually split and crack and break, and you would lose all of that sap. So there is another way that you can also boil it down, and that's to place all of your sap into a wooden trough. Now, you can't obviously place that trough on the fire. It's going to burn through. Again, you're going to lose all the sap, and it's not going to be good. You're going to be sad. So you have to come up with a way to be able to bring the fire to the sap. And this was a method that they were also using to boil water, to make soups, make stews. It wasn't just the maple syrup time of year tradition. But what you would have cooking stones. Maybe a stone kind of like this, like a basalt. Sometimes you can even use river stones, although under really high amounts of temperature change, they can actually explode, so you have to be careful about that. A really dense stone that you would keep in your fire, and it would hopefully absorb the heat of the fire, get super, super hot, and when you transfer it to your sap, it'll boil off some of the water. So we're actually going to see if that experiment will work today. That rock is so hot, you do not want to touch it with your bare hands. If you like the skin of your hands, you're going to burn your hands off. So I'm going to use a pair of deer antlers. You can even use forked sticks as well. I'm going to try and find a nice hot rock. My back is probably going to have to face you, so I apologize. I'll try not to get too hot here, but we got a nice hot fire sitting in the center. All right, and depending how good your balance skill was, wasn't that impressive? Like first pick
That
up,
was
right?
nice.
Yeah. That doesn't always happen. I'm a professional. You take this really hot rock, and you place it into your trough of sap. If we listen, so you can hear the boiling. You can even see a bunch of the steam, right? And when you see steam, that's really, really good. That means that rock was so hot that the water that in the sap that was touching the rock is now evaporating. It's leaving as steam. However, as you can tell, one rock will not be enough to do the job of taking it from 2 to 3% sugar up to pure maple sugar. So this would be a process, and you kind of get into a groove. You take out a cold rock, put it back in the fire, take out a hot rock, put it back in, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Now, the time period will all depend on how much sap you are actually trying to boil off. So it was said from sap to syrup, the whole process could take you up to a week. However, if you have ever been to a really big producer, modern day evaporator today, sometimes producers will actually work overnight If you have sap, they want to be making it off as fast as they can. And if you lived in this part of the world 200 years ago, maybe you just traveled over from Europe, you set up your farm here, you would also be boiling overnight. But 600 years ago, you'd actually want to let the nighttime work for you. You don't want to work overnight time. You'd let nature help you out. So you would stop boiling at night, and you would let, because since there are nights in this time of year, they get really cold, you would actually let a nice layer of ice form on the top of your sap trough. That's a tongue twister. On the top of your sap trough. And what would happen is that the sugar, it actually has a lower freezing point. So your sugar would stay below, and it would only be a layer of water that would actually freeze solid. So in the morning, you wake up, you just have to chip off that layer of ice on top, put it away, throw it away, and it will help to naturally concentrate the sugar underneath. Make sense? Yes, excellent. So you're actually letting nature help you. Now, 600 years ago, you didn't have glass bottles, you didn't have aluminum tins to be able to store your syrup in. So syrup wasn't actually your end game. You didn't really want maple syrup. You actually wanted to go all the way down to pure maple sugar. And sugar, as long as it stays dry, it will keep until you eat it. And this is a brick of pure maple sugar, so it looks something like this. And they would be storing it in birch cones that you'd usually keep up at the top of your longhouse where it was nice and smoky and dry, and it would last for a really, really long time. And what a lot of people maybe don't know is that maple syrup and maple sugar is super good for you. There's a lot of vitamins and nutrients. Sorry, I'm going to trip over something. There's a lot of vitamins and nutrients in maple sugar and in maple syrup. There is more potassium than a banana. There's more calcium than a glass of milk. There's a ton of manganese and iron and a whole list of things that I haven't memorized. And it would actually go more than just a sugar, right? This would be considered a really important medicine. One of the first harvests was actually making people better, right? It's improving your health. It'd usually be offered to children and to women first, people who need a lot, maybe more nutrients and vitamins. And it could even be something used for trade as well, which we often don't think about when we think about sugar, right? So we think sugar is pretty expendable, it's pretty cheap, you're just like, whatever, sugar. But it used to actually play a much more important role in Canada based on that sugar. Once you had the sugar, we often ask, well, what would you want to eat it on, right? Everybody, when we say maple syrup, says
pancake.
Pancake. Wow, that was really good. It's like I planned that. Everybody says pancakes, right? Now, the pancakes we eat today might be a little bit different than the pancakes you had 600 years ago. And our demo is actually going to take a turn into more of a cooking show aspect. We're going to get crazy here. And we're actually going to make something that they may have made a little bit differently 600 years ago. Something that you could have maple syrup on or maple sugar on. We're actually going to make a cornbread. Really simple cornbread. Depending on the nation, cornbreads could be extremely complicated. They could take hours. There would be tons of ingredients in it. We're doing the basic of the basic here because we don't have that kind of time for everybody to wait for some cornbread. So now that we change over to our cooking show, does anybody want to take a guess what our first ingredient of our cornbread would be? Ash. First ingredient, but we can take some ash. Do you want to help me? All right, so we have some ash. We actually have baking powder. But 600 years ago, they didn't have baking powder. Sorry, I just handed that to you. I didn't tell you what you're doing with it. Can you put that in the bowl, please? Thank you. Do you want to stick around? You can help me stir. Excellent. All right, so 600 years ago, you didn't have baking powder. You didn't really have a rising, a leveling agent. But you did have white ash from the fire, which does the same thing. The reason we don't want to cook with white ash anymore is because it contains a lot of lye, which isn't really good for you. But 600 years ago, you'd actually be eating a lot of corn. It was a pound of corn a day. So that's a lot of corn. And if anybody has ever had corn before, you might know that our bodies don't always fully digest corn. But 600 years ago, when you had lye, when you had ash in your food, it would actually help you to digest it further. So you were actually able to get more of the vitamins and nutrients out of corn than what we do nowadays. Nowadays, we have easy access to grocery stores, so we don't really need to worry about getting everything out of corn. But 600 years ago, you wanted to get everything you possibly could. So we would have white ash in our cornbread. Any other guesses? Maybe any of you guys sitting down there? What do you think we'd put in a cornbread? Sure, orange hat. What do you think? Cornbread. Corn, you got it. You're so smart. Can you come up and give me a hand? So we have some cornmeal. Can you put that into my big bowl? Beautiful. And then can you mix it after? Beautiful. So we have corn. If this is your first time to Crawford Lake, or maybe you have been here before, but maybe you haven't realized it, thank you so much, we actually have this really cool artifact that often gets missed. We have this thing called a grinding stone. Anybody heard of it? Anybody seen it? Maybe? It's actually located up at the top of our village. So if you take this path out and around, and the reason why it's so cool is because it's actually the only artifact that is in the exact same place when the Wendat were here 600 years ago. Everything else you might see in these longhouses, it's a reconstruction, right? These longhouses are not 600 years old. They're made out of wood. They have been rebuilt in the exact same place and the exact same size one had been, but they're not the exact same. However, that grinding stone has never moved. It's stayed in this exact same place. And essentially what it is, it's a large flat top rock that the women would usually bring corn kernels, dried corn kernels, seeds, nuts, roots, things that they wanted to grind up. And from so many women doing it in one spot for such a long time, it's actually eroded away these little bowl-shaped forms in it. And I think it's pretty cool. I mean, I work here, so I think a lot of things here are cool. But it's really interesting because there's not much other artifacts in Canada that you can get that up close and personal and actually sit at and touch something that somebody 600 years ago was sitting and touching, right? If anybody's ever traveled to Europe, you might have gone into a 600-year-old cathedral. We don't have that in Canada, right? A lot of our past was all from natural materials. So if you guys want a good piece of Canadian history today, go out and say hi to our grinding stone. It gets overlooked. It doesn't get much visitors. So you guys can go out and check it out and sit and have your own little moment with history. Essentially, that's why I'm saying corn, because they would grind up their corn into a flour. Most of the corn they were eating would be dried corn. That's why when you actually harvested fresh corn, it was a really big celebration because it might be the only time of year you'd actually have fresh corn. Otherwise, you're drying it and they're grinding up, usually having it in a cornbread. Excellent. Looks good? We have corn and we have ash. Anything else in a bread that kind of makes up like the main flour? Did you have your hand up? Sure. What do you think? What else in bread? I think I heard flour. Perfect. Come on up. Nobody else heard it, right? Excellent. Who said wheat flour, right? Yeah, you got it. All right. Can you toss that in the bowl for me? This one, please. Thank you. So we usually often use wheat flour in our breads today. 600 years ago. Awesome. Is it done? Excellent. Thank you so much. But 600 years ago, you didn't have wheat. That was, again, a plant that the Europeans brought over. So what you'd use instead would actually come from a plant that is really recognizable. I'm sure everybody's seen this plant before. It usually grows in really wet places, and its seeds look like a hot dog on a stick. Anybody seen that plant?
Oh.
Anybody know the name of that plant?
Bulrushes.
Cattails, you got it. And cattails are also really amazing because no matter what time of year, there is always something edible about a cattail. So at this time of year, you can actually gather up the roots, you can dry it up, grind it up, and it will taste pretty much exactly like wheat flour. So that would be what you'd be using in your bread as well. So we have corn, we have flour, we have ash. Now we need something that kind of it will be sticky, something a little bit oily, maybe? So we kind of hold things together a little bit. Water, we do need water, but I'm thinking of something else first. But how about you come up and help me anyway? The oily thing I was thinking of is something called oil. Or do you want to toss that in? Thank you. And today we use vegetable oil. Ooh, a turkey vulture.
Welcome back.
That's the first one I saw this spring. So that's actually a really good sign of spring because they migrate and then they only come back when there's good weather on the way. So look at that, everybody. Sign of spring. They also eat dead things. Okay. I think more fun facts, then we're going to go off topic. Oil, excellent. So we use vegetable oil. 600 years ago, one of the other crops, the other plants they were also farming and growing here were sunflowers. And you can collect sunflower seeds and put it into a pot full of water. And if you crush them in that water and the oil will actually separate. So the oil will float up to the top, you can skim it off, and you'd actually have a sunflower oil which you'd be using. Now the last ingredient we need is a wet one. Water, you got it, all right. Perfect, thanks for stirring. Can I pass over, can you actually stir and I'll put the water so that we don't get too runny and we have flapjack, or we have crepes. Excellent, all right, so we're gonna add some water. I don't really have anything fun to say about water because water's water. Actually, I could talk about the lake. Has anybody seen the lake already today? No? The lake is a really special type of lake. It's called a meromictic lake, which means it's only partially mixing. The very bottom half of the water of Crawford Lake never mixes or stirs, and it's pretty much devoid of oxygen. So that means nothing lives at the bottom of Crawford Lake. No plants, no fish, no bugs, no bacteria, and whatever falls to the bottom becomes perfectly preserved. So we've actually been able to get samples of things that have fallen in Crawford Lake for the past 1,000 years, which is pretty cool. And only 17 lakes in Canada are meromictic. And if you think of how many lakes Canada has, we have a lot. So that's pretty special that we've got it here. All right, how's it looking? Actually, it looks perfect. Thank you so much. That's awesome. Excellent. All right, so we've got our nice little bread batter here. Now, some of the recipes for cornbread, some cornbreads would actually be boiled for hours. Sometimes they'd even be boiled in sap, so it would help bring out the sweetness. Sometimes you'd have dried berries or nuts, so you'd make it more of a full meal. Again, we're going basic of the basic. And I have a large flat top rock here sitting in the fire, hopefully holding some of the fire's heat. I put a little bit of white ash on the top so that my cornbread won't stick to it. And depending on how thick your dough is, you can also wrap it around the end of the stick and also roast it around the fire, kind of like roasting a marshmallow as well. But we want it, because it's kind of maple syrup, everybody thinks pancakes. We're going to try to make my cornbread look like a pancake, just for fun. And let's see how this goes. All right.
I think so.
Alright, so now it's essentially just a waiting game. Depending on how hot, it might take 10 to 15 minutes. Sometimes I can even flip it depending how it's going. Please don't roll off. I made it too slippery with the ash. I think it'll be okay. Oh no.
Who gets the pancake?
Is that?
Who gets the pancake?
Alright, so the moment everybody's been waiting for in any good cooking show, everybody's always offered a taste of cornbread. So we're just going to hang around, we're going to watch it slowly cook, and then we're going to break up a few bits for everybody to try. Sounds good?
Yeah.
No! The health service, the health department would not be happy if we were to offer that to you, and I'm surprised some of you even said yes. You guys would just take anything, won't you?
I need it.
Just some, yeah.
That looks
Here we
good.
go. Not too bad, right?
Need a flatter rock.
Flatter rock. It is a little bit tilted. Like any good cooking show, we actually have prepared some cornbread ahead of time. So it's kind of your reward for putting up listening to me. And we have actually used all modern ingredients. We did not go out and collect any cattail roots. We did not use ash from the fire. We do use cornmeal and wheat flour, vegetable oil, baking powder, and water. That is it. So if you have any allergies, that is what is in it. This is essentially also just kind of the channel we use to get maple syrup into us, essentially. So that's why we had to come up with something. How can we get maple syrup into us? We thought cornbread. And we do have maple syrup that you can try on your cornbread. Now I'm going to give you 5 years of accumulated knowledge of how to get the most maple syrup out of this experience. And that is, I won't take with my fingers because that's annoying. No, sorry. I wanted a bigger piece, that's okay. Sorry. So when you get your cornbread, it's just a nice little half cornbread here. It's not going to be anybody's school lunch or anything. Just nice little half cornbread. But to get the most amount of maple syrup today, you want to take your thumb or your finger. Your thumb's bigger though, so get a bigger hole with your thumb. Take your thumb and you jam it in the center, so you make essentially a little bowl of cornbread, and then we will fill that bowl up with maple syrup. If you don't make the bowl, then the maple syrup just kind of drops on the outside. It's a little bit messy. You lose some. You don't get as much. But if you want lots of maple syrup, you put it in a little bowl, and you can get a lot, and then you can eat it. If you don't want the cornbread, but you do want the maple syrup, if it's up to you, it's your hand, you are more than welcome to put 2 fingers out, and we can dribble maple syrup on your fingers that you can lick off if you just want maple syrup too. Any way that you can get maple syrup in you at this time of year, we can help to accommodate that. And other than that, we will come around, so everybody will hopefully be able to get a piece of cornbread and maple syrup. If you're looking for anything else to do today though, at 2 o'clock, there is going to be a syrup sampling in the main visitor center in the auditorium. So you're going to try a bunch of different grades of maple syrup. We also have maple taffy for sale. You just have to buy the tickets inside the gift shop and then take it outside. Don't all rush down for taffy at once because we can't accommodate this many people for taffy, but if you go in small groups, we'll hopefully be able to get some taffy into you. And then your ticket today, and this works all year round, your ticket into Crawford Lake today also will get you into any other Conservation Halton Park today for free. And that also is for any other time of year, so if you wanted to plan and go to multiple parks and spend a whole day out with us, you're more than welcome to do that. And if you have questions about how that works, you can always feel free to talk to us. And if you have any other questions about the village and what life would have been like 600 years ago, or anything maple syrup related, or really anything at all, we'll talk to anybody. You come up and ask Kaylin and myself, and we can help to assist with that. Otherwise, is that it?
That sounds good.
That's it. Thank you for listening. Beautiful. The one side's getting toasty. We'll have to rotate the.
So if you put your hands out like a bowl. Yeah, you got it.
All right, maybe get the.
Oh, I'll get one too. It's a squish your little.
That's a good technique.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Oh, you stay there. We'll come to you. We'll be around.
Okay, thank you.
Can I take a picture of it, guys?
Try another one because I gave them.
Yeah, just.
It dropped.
You got to be able to just get like a dollop.
Yeah, do you want to do 2 fingers? And that's easier.
Okay.
Yeah. And then just like a little chant. Is that okay? Do you want more?
No, that's great.
Okay. Anybody else missing maple syrup? I need maple syrup.
You put it in like a bowl. If you put your hand like a bowl, you can drop it.
Very good. Towards Crawford Lake, we have 3 buckets on the way down. Everybody's doing the old technique. Yes. Everybody likes the maple syrup. I've learned this. It's a good way to get lots of maple syrup.
All right, babe. The time is.
I want to ask if they have, of course,
Absolutely. Yeah, do you know the difference? Yeah, and they never fall off, right? That's good. Somebody will learn it. Ooh, gosh.
we could try to make cornbread. Yeah, you like cornbread? Oh, I made pancakes over a fire.
You're
going to get one of the women to give us a tour.
Ready?